What if I told you that your heart changes within the very first minutes of a walk? And no, there isn't one single magic minute that's identical for everyone. What science can point to is a range, a point where your body has stayed active long enough, at a meaningful pace, to register the walk as a true training signal. Imagine you're sitting there, scrolling through your phone, and you decide to get up and take a walk. It seems like a simple, almost insignificant gesture, but your heart doesn't see it that way at all. In a matter of minutes, it starts responding as if it received a positive alert signal. All right, movement incoming, let's get to work. What looks like just a stroll around the block is, practically speaking, a gentle stress test for your cardiovascular system. With those first few steps, your muscles start demanding more oxygen. To meet that demand, the heart has to pump more blood. But it doesn't just do this randomly. There's a whole adaptation process controlled by your nervous system and blood vessels. The body adjusts pressure, heart rate, and blood flow, almost like tuning an instrument before a concert. And here's the curious part. This response isn't just momentary. Even a short walk can wake up mechanisms that, when repeated day after day, are linked to a lower risk of heart attacks, better artery flexibility, and lower blood pressure, especially in people with hypertension. It's no exaggeration to say that the heart learns from every walk you take regularly. The detail almost no one talks about is that there is a tipping point where this walk stops being just a warm-up and starts, in fact, generating measurable protection for the heart. Researchers have tried to estimate this threshold in practical terms, and that's what we're going to break down throughout this video. No miracle promises, just what the studies actually show. The heart likes walking because it is a predictable, continuous, and low-impact effort. Unlike explosive movements like sprints or jumping, walking gives the cardiovascular system a controlled stress. This means the heart is challenged but not battered. It works harder for a while, then returns to rest. And this alternation, repeated many times, is exactly the type of stimulus that strengthens the heart muscle. From a physiological point of view, walking regularly increases the efficiency with which the heart pumps blood. Over time, it can send more blood to the body with fewer beats. It's like swapping out an old, noisy, gas-guzzling engine for a silent, high-efficiency motor. This is one of the reasons why active people tend to have a lower resting heart rate than sedentary people. Another reason walking is so effective is what it does to your blood vessels. With each step, blood flow increases and creates force against the artery walls, which stimulates the release of substances that help keep them flexible and healthy. Stiff arteries are a major driver of high blood pressure and increased cardiovascular risk. A more pliable artery handles pressure variations throughout the day much better. And then there's the metabolic piece of the puzzle. Walking improves insulin sensitivity, helps control glucose, positively influences cholesterol, and aids in reducing chronic low-grade inflammation, which is a key factor in heart disease. It might seem like just a walk, but the chain reaction of benefits this triggers is far greater than most people imagine. During those first few minutes, you might only notice the basics. Your breathing gets a little faster, your body warms up, your muscles wake up, but inside, your body's already shifting gears. The sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear, releasing substances that increase your heart rate and redirect blood to the muscles in action. The heart starts beating faster, but in an organized way, following the body's demand. At the same time, blood vessels in your legs and working muscles dilate, making it easier for blood to pass through. This improves oxygen and nutrient delivery and carbon dioxide removal. It's a game of fine-tuning. Flow increases in some places and decreases in others, always prioritizing what is being used most at that moment. That is why even a light walk is considered a real cardiovascular stimulus. There's also a metabolic warm-up happening. The body starts using more glucose and fat as energy sources. Over time, this mechanism becomes more efficient, which helps reduce visceral fat accumulation, that fat stored around your organs that is especially dangerous for the heart. So, even if the scale doesn't seem to budge much, there is a much more important change happening on the inside.
And this is exactly the phase where many people give up because they feel a slight discomfort when leaving a resting state. The heart racing a bit, breathing falling out of rhythm, a feeling of, wow, I am really out of shape. The truth is, this mild discomfort is just the body adapting. The bad news is that those who always stop at this point often don't stay long enough to reach the phase where the benefits become clearer over time for the heart. There is a minimum time the body needs to stay in motion for the heart to stop just responding to effort and start registering it as a protective stimulus. It's not magic, it's physiology. In many studies, the zone where exercise begins to be associated with reduced cardiovascular risk isn't in the first few minutes, but when you maintain continuous activity for a little longer without stopping. Generally speaking, research shows that after a certain duration of continuous walking at light to moderate intensity, the body starts to more clearly activate acute adaptations in blood pressure, vessel tone, and inflammatory markers. And these responses, repeated several times a week, are what add up to build medium and long-term protection. It's not one single day that changes everything. It's the repetition. Another critical point is intensity. If the walk is so light that you can barely feel the difference between standing still and moving, the stimulus might be too small to generate significant adaptation. On the other hand, you don't need to walk as if you were running. The sweet spot lies, for most people, at that intensity where you can hold a conversation, but you feel like you're actually working.
It is in this balance between time and intensity that real heart protection starts to add up. If you want a practical target, most guidelines and large population studies point to about 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity activity. Many people translate that into roughly 30 minutes on most days, often at a brisk but sustainable pace. You can still benefit below that, but this is a common threshold where the signal becomes much clearer over time. And once you understand that, even a walk to the grocery store starts to look different. While you walk, your blood pressure isn't static. It rises a bit during the effort to ensure blood gets where it needs to go, but in healthy people, this increase is controlled. The interesting part is what happens after. Often in the hours following a walk, your blood pressure tends to drop lower than it was before. This effect, called post-exercise hypotension, is one of the reasons walking is so highly recommended for those with high blood pressure. Your heart rate joins this dance too. During the walk, it goes up to meet demand, but with training, it rises less for the same amount of effort. This means your heart has become more efficient. It's as if it learned to do the same job while using less energy. This improvement isn't just technical trivia, it is directly linked to a lower risk of cardiovascular death in physically active people. Now, blood vessels are a big part of this story, even though most people rarely think about them. Increased blood flow stimulates the release of nitric oxide, a molecule that helps dilate arteries and keeps the endothelium, the inner lining of your vessels, healthy. A well-functioning endothelium is a barrier against fat plaques and clots that can lead to heart attacks and strokes. Here's something short videos rarely mention. This dance between pressure, heart rate, and vessels isn't just an immediate response to exercise. Over time, the cardiovascular system's operating pattern changes. It's like re-educating your heart and arteries. And I want you to tell me in the comments, have you noticed your heart responding differently since you started walking more often? Or are you still finding it hard to build a consistent routine? There is a common trap, thinking that any quick movement fixes everything for the heart, like walking 2 minutes to the corner and believing that counts as structured exercise. Not quite. That type of super short movement is better than staying still all day, of course, but it's usually not strong enough to trigger the cardiovascular adaptations that studies link to heart protection.
For a long time, guidelines recommended blocks of at least 10 minutes of continuous walking at light to moderate intensity to start seeing consistent benefits. Today, there's discussion that you can accumulate shorter periods throughout the day. But when we look specifically at heart health, it still makes a huge difference to have periods where you walk non-stop for a bit, longer, letting the body truly enter exercise mode. In practice, this means getting up from your chair often is great to break up sedentary time, but it probably doesn't replace that stretch where you walk continuously, feeling your heart working a little harder than at rest. Several studies showing reduced cardiovascular risk use a benchmark of around 30 minutes of activity on most days of the week. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it can't just be a lap around the block every few days.
A common mistake is thinking you walk a lot because you move around the house or office, but the effort stays so light and broken up that you never reach a continuous stretch where your heart has to work meaningfully above rest. The tipping point we talked about earlier lies exactly in this balance. It's not about walking until you faint, nor sitting all day counting loose steps. It's about having, with some frequency, periods where you consciously decide you are walking to take care of your heart. Another million-dollar question is it better to walk slowly for longer or walk at a faster pace for less time? Observational studies with thousands of people show that those who walk at a brisk pace generally have a lower risk of death from cardiovascular causes than those who stick to a very slow stroll. This suggests that it's not just the minutes that count, but the intensity weighs heavily on the scale too. Walking at a moderate pace is that sweet spot where you can hold a conversation, but you feel your breathing is a bit heavier. We call this the talk test. A fast walk or brisk walk pushes you close to the limit where you'd struggle to speak in full sentences without gasping for air. Science shows benefits across this entire range, but the closer you get to that more intense rhythm, within your personal limits, the greater the stimulus tends to be for your heart and blood vessels. There is also the concept of interval walking, alternating harder, faster stretches with lighter recovery periods. For some people, this is an interesting way to get a solid cardiovascular stimulus in less total time, provided there are no medical restrictions. For example, short bursts of power walking followed by a normal strolling pace. This can efficiently improve conditioning and blood pressure control. The bottom line is that the best walk is the one you can stick with consistently. If you hate the feeling of power walking, starting with moderate intensity and adjusting over the weeks already brings great results. The heart responds to the immediate challenge and the history of movement you build. You don't need to be an athlete, you need to be consistent. If you spend hours sitting every day, working, studying, or driving, you've probably heard that sitting is the new smoking. It's true, but there's a nuance often left unexplained. It's not just the act of sitting that's harmful, but the combination of long sedentary hours with the almost total absence of structured physical activity. The good news is that even for those living this lifestyle, walking is still one of the simplest and most effective ways to start reversing this scenario. Studies show that very sedentary people who start including regular walks in their routine see a significant drop in cardiovascular disease risk compared to those who remain completely inactive. The impact is often biggest for people starting from zero because the gap between no activity and some activity is large. Even a simple walking routine can create noticeable changes in how the cardiovascular system handles daily demands.
But it's not just about taking the walk box at the end of the day and staying motionless the rest of the time. Breaking up long periods of sitting with small standing breaks, taking the stairs, pacing while talking on the phone, getting up to refill your water instead of hoarding bottles at your desk, all of this helps reduce absolute sedentary time, which is also a risk factor. These micro movements don't replace structured walking, but they work as a team with it. So if you recognize yourself as someone who spends most of the day in a chair, don't fall into the trap of thinking it's too late or that only a fancy gym membership would solve it. Starting with simple walks, respecting your limits, is already a huge move in the right direction.
Science is very clear on one thing. The heart prefers someone who starts slow and keeps going 1,000 times more than someone who never starts at all. A question that pops up all the time is, how do I know walking is actually helping my heart if I can't see it working? You can observe some indirect signs, both during the walk and in daily life. One of the first is realizing you can walk longer or at a faster pace without getting as winded as before. This improvement in exercise tolerance indicates your cardiovascular system is adapting. Another sign is faster recovery. In the beginning, your heart might race for a long time after you stop. With a few weeks of practice, it's common to notice your heart rate drops back to normal much quicker. This shows the heart is responding better to changes in demand, which is a positive marker of conditioning. In daily life, many people report climbing stairs with less struggle, feeling less short of breath during simple tasks, and noticing that heavy feeling or fatigue at the end of the day decreases. In people with high blood pressure, home measurements over weeks often show more controlled numbers, especially when walking is combined with good diet and sleep. In a doctor's office, this frequently shows up as more stable blood pressure. Then there are the subjective but crucial signs: better sleep, reduced anxiety, more mental clarity, and a general sense of well-being. All of this influences the heart because the cardiovascular system is highly responsive to physical and emotional stress. You don't need expensive gadgets to track these changes. Paying attention to your body is already a great simple progress monitor. When talking about the minimum effective dose of walking for the heart, many guidelines converge on a moderate amount of aerobic physical activity per week, on most days at light to moderate intensity. Translating this to real life, it's like getting at least something close to 30 minutes of brisk walking on most days. From this threshold onwards, cardiovascular benefits start to become very clear in population studies. But there is the ideal, which goes a bit beyond the minimum. People who manage to accumulate more activity time throughout the week, whether through longer walks or daily walks combined with other forms of movement, tend to have even greater protection. Of course, there's a limit. It's not an endless more is better, but most people are so far below this threshold that the initial concern should just be getting off zero and reaching at least the minimum. The dose also changes a bit depending on your stage of life. Young adults generally tolerate more intense walking well and can play with faster paces. Middle-aged people, especially those who already have high blood pressure, diabetes, or a family history of heart disease, benefit hugely from regular walks, even at moderate intensity, as long as they are consistent. Seniors might need to adapt the terrain, footwear, and pace, but they continue to respond very well to walking, including for preventing functional loss. For those starting from a complete standstill, think progressive. Start with just a few minutes that don't cause exaggerated discomfort and increase the duration or intensity a little bit each week. The brain loves this gradual process. And if this kind of content is helping you better understand how to take care of yours, you can support the channel using the Super Thanks button below. This shows YouTube that it's worth promoting serious health information and helps me bring you more videos like this. And of course, anyone with diagnosed heart disease or symptoms like chest pain or severe shortness of breath needs to talk to a doctor before defining their heart walking dose to do it safely. Knowing that walking helps the heart is one thing. Turning that into a habit is something completely different. The trick is to stop treating the walk as an extraordinary event and slot it into your routine, almost like brushing your teeth. It could be walking after breakfast, after lunch, or at the end of the day, always at a more or less fixed time. The brain loves this kind of repetition, and after a while, walking becomes almost automatic. Another powerful strategy is habit stacking, associating the walk with something pleasurable. Listening to a podcast, music you love, walking with someone you enjoy, or choosing a visually pleasing route makes a real difference in your chances of sticking with it. The heart doesn't care if you're listening to rock music or absolute silence. What matters is that you move often enough for it to keep receiving healthy stimuli. It can help to view walking like a dose you build with steps, not pills. Consistency matters here. Doing a little regularly tends to beat doing a lot once in a while. Just like you wouldn't take something important at random, skipping several days, then doubling it, walking works best when it shows up in your week again and again. The real secret is regularity, not perfection.
If you've made it this far, you've realized that the exact moment walking starts helping your heart isn't a magic date, but a combination of duration, intensity, and repetition over time. If this video helped you see walking through a new lens, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this with someone who keeps saying that just walking doesn't solve anything. And let me know in the comments, what is the first real tweak you're going to make to your routine after everything you heard here?